1847, a bitter winter in Massachusetts. Inside a quiet colonial asylum, doctors whisper about a woman they once tried to cure. Her name was Latoya, a former slave brought north in chains, whose screams echoed long after her death. The walls still carry her voice. The halls still smell of burned linen and iron. They called it the case that should never be spoken of. But someone kept her diary. And tonight, for the first time, we open it. I was born where the air itself was chained. The year was 1823, and I came into this world beneath the blistering sun of a Virginia plantation. My mother, they said, had the quiet hands of a healer, but even her touch could not soften the weight of iron on our wrists. I remember her lullabies, soft, trembling hymns that made even the night seem merciful. But nights end, and masters wake early. They called him Mr. Harlan, a man whose smile could turn into cruelty faster than a blade drawn from a boot. He owned the plantation, the land, and every breath we took. To him, I was property, something between cattle and sin. When I turned 16, he sold my brother to a man in Georgia. The sound of my mother's cries that day never left me. They stuck to my skin like the heat. Years later, I was chosen, not for kindness, but for display. "You'll serve inside the house," his wife said. Mistress Abigail smelled of lavender and guilt. She liked to watch me move, as if I were an animal taught to stand upright. She would smile sweetly to the guests and then slap me behind closed doors for walking too softly or looking too long at the floor. Each bruise became a secret language my body spoke. But fate, as cruel as it is clever, began to shift one winter evening. A northern visitor had come, a doctor from Massachusetts, pale and curious. He studied the plantation, the people, the sickness of it all. I remember him watching me with strange pity. He asked my name, and I told him, Latoya. He wrote it down in a small black notebook. Weeks later, a letter came. Mr. Harlan read it aloud at dinner. "Your girl is requested for study in Boston, humanitarian grounds." He laughed. But gold was offered, and greed speaks louder than pride. I was sold again, this time not to a master, but to science. They said freedom waited in the north. They said there were no chains there. But as the carriage crossed the frozen border, I realized chains can be invisible too. When we reached the Massachusetts State Asylum, snow fell like ash. They called me Subject 13. They wanted to know how memory, pain, and obedience lived in a woman's brain. They asked me to close my eyes, to remember every lash, every prayer, every scream. I did, and sometimes I think that's where I died the first time. But the real death, the one they couldn't bury, was still to come. And what I did next still stains those halls. Days became experiments. They said they were helping, but their help tasted like poison. Dr. Whitlock, the same man who once looked at me with pity, now watched me with calculation. He asked how it felt to lose a child, how long pain could last before faith breaks. I told him pain had no clock, it just changes rooms. They took my hair, my blood, my tears. They placed metal caps on my temples and called it progress. Every shock made me see things, shadows of my mother, my brother calling from the cotton fields, and sometimes my own reflection smiling back when I wasn't. At night, I'd hear whispers, the other patients praying, weeping, or laughing into madness. One girl, Annabelle, said she'd seen me walking the hall when I hadn't moved from my bed. "You float," she said. "You look peaceful." Peace, the cruelest lie of all. Then came Christmas Eve. The doctors celebrated upstairs with wine and roast goose. Downstairs, the patients shivered in candlelight. I was given a new trial, a substance they said would quiet the memory. But when it touched my tongue, it burned like liquid fire. I knew then they were trying to erase me. That night, as they left me strapped to the bed, I whispered a name, my mother's, and felt something stir inside me. Anger, old and heavy, began to breathe. The candle by the window flickered, though no wind came. I heard the metal buckle snap on its own. My hands were free. I touched the air, and it felt thick, alive, like something was listening. From that night onward, The doctors grew uneasy. They said the room turned cold when I entered. They said their lamps dimmed. I said nothing, because what was waking inside me was older than any science. And when New Year's Eve came, they would learn what true memory feels like. It started with silence. The kind of silence that hums before a storm. Snow beat against the asylum windows like fists. The doctors had gathered in the grand hall, music, laughter, clinking glasses. I stood in the shadows, pretending to surf. No one noticed the calmness in my face. No one noticed that I no longer blinked. I remember holding the tray of glasses, each filled with their shining red wine. I had slipped something inside earlier, not poison, but the herbs my mother once used to make men sleep so deep they dreamt of death. I watched them drink. I watched them laugh. But Dr. Whitlock didn't. He raised his glass, then paused, eyes locking with mine. "You look different tonight, Latoya," he said. "I am," I whispered. He didn't understand. Not yet. One by one, their laughter turned to coughing. The music cracked, the piano keys sticking on a high note. I walked past their trembling hands, past their pleading eyes, and toward the grand hearth burning in the center of the hall. The firelight danced across the portraits. Harlan, Abigail, every face that once owned my name. I lifted the oil lamp, the one that burned day and night to keep the patients calm. Then, I poured it on the curtains. The flame caught faster than breath. The room became a storm of screams and fire. I remember the smell of wax, linen, and fear. Dr. Whitlock tried to reach me, but the floor between us burned apart. "You'll kill us all," he shouted. I smiled, the way Mistress Abigail used to. "No," I said, "just the memory." The ceiling collapsed. Smoke filled every prayer. And as I turned toward the doorway, I saw the girl Annabelle, pale, trembling, whispering, "You float." Maybe I did. Because when I stepped into the snow, I didn't feel the cold anymore. And behind me, the asylum burned until the stars turned red. I ran. Or maybe I drifted. The snow swallowed my footprints faster than I could make them. The asylum's bell tower collapsed in a roar that echoed through the valley. I didn't look back. Some things are meant to burn without witnesses. When dawn came, I found myself at the edge of the woods. My dress was singed, my hands blackened, but inside, I felt clean, free. I thought I had escaped. But freedom is strange. It's quiet. Yes, but it listens. And sometimes, it whispers back. As I hid in an abandoned chapel nearby, I began to hear their voices again. The doctors, the patients, the cries, all circling me. I thought it was guilt. But then the church candles lit themselves. The pews creaked as if something invisible sat beside me. And from the altar, I heard a voice, soft, echoing like my mother's lullaby. "You are not finished." The snow outside turned black, like ashes falling upward. I looked into the cracked mirror behind the altar and saw myself smiling. But my reflection's lips did not move. She whispered, "They will remember." Days later, search parties found the ruins of the asylum. Dozens dead, their faces twisted in terror. They said the fire had started from within. But the strange part, no one could find my body. Some swore they saw a woman walking the hill that night, her eyes glowing like embers. Some said it was the devil's work. But the truth was simpler. I didn't die in that fire. I became it. Years passed. The asylum was rebuilt, brick over ash, prayer over guilt. They called it Whitlock Hospital now, in honor of the doctor who perished in service. But at night, the nurses would speak of cold drafts in empty rooms, of whispers in the ward where the old files were kept, files that bore a single name, Latoya. I remained, not as flesh, but as memory. I wandered those halls where I once screamed, watching new faces replace old sins. The doctors now wore white coats, not chains, but their eyes held the same hunger for control. They still studied pain. They still called it progress. Sometimes, a patient would look up suddenly, shivering, and say, "Someone's standing there." But there was no one, not to their eyes. And sometimes, I'd hum the lullaby my mother sang, soft, broken, endless. The sound would carry through the vents, down the hallways, into their sleep. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted remembrance. Because forgetting is the cruelest chain of all. They tried to erase my name from the records, but paper remembers what man denies. And one winter night, when a young nurse found my file and read it aloud, the lights flickered and the smell of smoke returned. She whispered, "Latoya." I whispered back, "You may think stories like mine end with peace, a grave, a prayer, a ghost fading into dawn. But not this one, because peace cannot live where truth is buried alive. I tell my story not for pity, but for warning. Every wall built on suffering will someday speak. Every cruelty disguised as care will echo. And every name erased will be rewritten, in fire, in ash, in memory. Sometimes the doctors hear footsteps at night. Sometimes the patients dream of a woman singing. Sometimes the snow outside the asylum falls red again. They say it's superstition. I say it's the past, remembering itself. If you ever walk those halls in Massachusetts, listen closely. You might hear a voice in the cold, soft, steady, almost kind. She'll say, "You can't cure pain by forgetting it." And if you answer, she'll whisper one last thing. The same words my mother once told me when I was still human, still afraid, still alive. The fire you fear is only the light you've buried. And with that, the air will turn still. The smell of smoke will linger. And you'll understand why even the doctors wanted to forget. Years turned to decades, yet I remained inside those walls. They rebuilt the asylum after every fire, renaming it, repainting it, pretending history could be whitewashed like soot. But ashes never forget. The nurses spoke of strange drafts and unlit candles flaring on their own. Patients whispered that the halls breathed at night. Some said they saw a woman in gray, her eyes dim coals, gliding past the ward where the old records once lay. They called her the woman in the fire. I watched generations of doctors come and go, men of progress. They claimed, wielding needles instead of whips, papers instead of chains. Yet their hunger was the same. They tested, recorded, discarded. The language of cruelty simply changed dialect. One winter of 1892, Sister Ellen arrived, a kind-hearted nun sent to purify the spirit of the hospital. She carried a rosary of black pearls and a voice that trembled when she prayed. I listened to her prayers each night. She meant well. But mercy cannot live where denial thrives. The longer she stayed, the colder her breath became. She heard footsteps that stopped when she turned, saw reflections of faces that weren't hers. On the 12th night, she lit a candle before my hidden file and whispered, "If you seek peace, show me your pain." So I did. Every window shattered inward. Her candle burst into a pillar of light. When the nuns found her at dawn, she was kneeling, eyes open, lips frozen in prayer, untouched by flame but marked by ash. After that, the sisters locked the ward and forbade anyone to speak my name again. But silence feeds memory, and the walls kept whispering, "Latoya." In 1961, the hospital prepared for renovation. Walls came down. Secrets surfaced. Beneath the plaster of the West Wing, a young nurse named Clara Morgan found a small iron box sealed with wax. Inside lay pages brittle as autumn leaves, my diary, my voice, trapped for a century. Clara read every word. Each line I'd written bled sorrow and fire. She said she could feel the heat through the paper. At first she hid the journal in her locker, but curiosity is a kind of haunting. She read aloud to the empty ward one night, my lullaby, my last confession. The lights flickered. The hallway clock stopped. A smell of smoke filled the air, though nothing burned. She looked into the mirror above the sink and saw me standing behind her, smiling, not in malice, but recognition. She whispered, "Latoya, you're real." I touched her shoulder through the glass, and she felt warmth instead of cold. For a moment, we existed together, two women bound by different eras, but the same silence. I wanted to tell her everything, that pain remembered is pain released. But human hearts can't bear centuries. The moment broke, the mirror cracked. Next morning, Clara's locker was found open, the diary missing. She was gone. They said she ran away, but the night guard claimed he saw her walking toward the woods in her white uniform, humming an old slave hymn that no one had taught her. The hospital shut down 5 years later, and once again, I was left in the dark, waiting. Now it is the present. The building stands in ruin, Whitlock Hospital, condemned but never forgotten. Graffiti coats its bricks, ivy claws the windows, and yet, cameras still come. 3 young explorers enter with flashlights and trembling excitement, recording for their channel. "We are spending the night in the most haunted hospital in Massachusetts," one says. They laugh, not knowing laughter awakens echoes. They step into my ward. The air thickens. The red light of the camera flickers like a pulse. "Dude, temperature just dropped," another whispers. Then the door slams behind them. Their lights catch on a phrase etched into the wall in faded charcoal. "The fire you fear is the light you've buried." One boy reads it aloud. The sound trembles through the hall like thunder underwater. The monitors, long dead, spark to life, showing static faces. A lullaby hums from nowhere and everywhere. Their breaths turn white. They run, but every hallway loops back to mine. The girl among them drops the camera. It keeps rolling, captures only boots, whispers, then a shadow crossing the lens. Later, police find the camera at the doorway, snow falling in through the broken roof. No bodies, only a faint burn mark on the floor shaped like a hand. And when the video uploads itself a week later, the comments fill with one question: who was the woman singing? The channel never posts again. But sometimes, late at night, the clip reappears under new accounts, same frame, same humming, same whisper just before it ends. You can't cure pain by forgetting it. I have watched centuries turn like pages. The chains that once bound me have long rusted, yet their echoes still tremble beneath the earth. Freedom came to the land, they say, but not to its memories. Pain leaves its fingerprints on time, and I am its keeper. Tonight, the moon hangs low over the ruins, soft as breath upon skin. A storm moves behind the hills, carrying the scent of rain and smoke. For the first time in decades, someone returns, not with cameras, not for fear, but for truth. A young woman steps into the hallway, holding an old notebook to her chest. She moves gently, reverently, as though walking through a church. Her voice breaks the silence. "My name is Clara Morgan. My grandmother vanished here in 1961. The air trembles. The walls remember her bloodline. She kneels near the burn mark on the floor, the shape of my hand, and opens the notebook. It's my diary, restored, pages bound anew. She reads aloud the final entry, her voice trembling. "May those who seek to heal not forget who was buried beneath their mercy." As she finishes, lightning tears across the sky. For the first time in 178 years, I feel warmth again. Not fire, not vengeance, just light. The walls sigh. The dust rises in swirls like souls released. My reflection appears in the window beside her, not as a ghost, but as memory made visible. She doesn't scream. She smiles. "Rest, Latoya," she whispers. And for the first time, I do. The wind moves through the corridors like a hymn. The flames that once destroyed now glow gently in the moonlight, forming no smoke, only shimmer. The building exhales, one long breath, and the sound fades into peace. By dawn, the ruins are gone. In their place, wildflowers bloom where the ward once stood, gold and violet, bending toward the sun. Travelers passing by say the air smells faintly of cedar and lilac, though no trees grow nearby. But those who linger long enough, when the evening falls, sometimes hear a woman's hum carried by the wind, a soft melody, neither sad nor afraid. They call it Latoya's song. And if you listen closely, you'll hear the last word she left behind. To be remembered is to be free.